In the year 2120, the members of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation begin a 65-year space mission 800 million miles from Earth. After a long period of cryogenic sleep, the crew wake up and go straight to the kitchen to eat. After all, they have spent several months unconscious. After breakfast, Chibuzo goes to feed the specimens on board the ship, as they are a fundamental part of the mission. She then joins her colleagues for another period of cryogenic sleep until they reach Earth's orbit. Meanwhile, in Neverland, Cavalier, the world's youngest trillionaire, is funding research that consists of transposing a human consciousness into a synthetic body. As Marcy is very ill, she has no choice but to accept being a guinea pig for this experiment, as this is the only way she can continue to live. After waking up, Marcy will have a new body and a new identity and will be called Wendy, because no one can know who she really is so as not to violate the confidentiality of the research. A few hours after the procedure begins, Wendy wakes up and starts exploring the island with her new abilities. Despite having gained numerous advantages with her new body, Marcy finds it strange that she has been transferred to an adult body. When asked why this has happened, Sylvia reveals that synthetic bodies don't age, so the girl has been transferred to the body in which she will live forever. Unlike the human body, which manufactures hormones responsible for regulating mood, the synthetic body is completely linear, so Wendy's emotions are hardly altered throughout the day. This detail is enough to undermine Wendy's human experience and make her feel different from everyone else. That afternoon, less than a week after going through the transition, Wendy receives news that there are other sick children arriving on the island and Sylvia asks for her help to prepare them to be transferred to a synthetic body. In an attempt to reassure them about the process they will be going through, Wendy shows them all the advantages she has gained with her new body and says that these children will be able to become as strong as she is. Cavalier's reason for recruiting children to make the transition is that adult minds are too rigid to make the journey, so the scientists need children to use as guinea pigs. The next day, Wendy accompanied all the young people on their transitions with the aim of making sure they felt welcome as soon as they woke up. After locking himself in the control cabin, Morrow releases the alien specimens and purposely puts the lives of his entire crew at risk. Hearing Sullivan knocking on the door looking for shelter, the cyborg decides to ignore her and informs the base that all the members of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation are eliminated. After brutally eliminating Sullivan, the alien who destroyed the entire crew starts pounding on the door in an attempt to reach Morrow. However, at that moment, the man has already left everything ready to ensure that his ship crashes to Earth and enters the impact room to try and survive the collision. The burden that all the young people who have gone through the transition have to carry is the fact that they can no longer see their families. Despite not being allowed to meet her brother, Wendy tries to stay as close to him as possible, if only through the cameras of the town of Prodigy, where Joe lives. Ever since his sister supposedly perished, the young man has been going about his life trying not to listen to his grief, because he knows it can't bring Mercy back. On days when he misses her, he watches their favorite cartoon while remembering the time when they were both children. One day, after the crash of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation spaceship, Joe and the members of his corporation go into the field to locate survivors, evacuate the wounded and secure the site. However, when he arrives on the battlefield, Joe feels lost, as he has never been recruited to contain such a huge amount of damage before. At this point, the team splits into two groups and Joe is assigned to rescue the people who were inside the building at the time of the accident. As the team walks around the site looking for survivors, Joe comes across the spaceship and is shocked to see how big it is. In an attempt to see if there are any crew members still alive, he and his colleagues enter the ship and search every corner. It doesn't take long before the soldiers realize that this is a Weyland-Yutani laboratory ship and come to the conclusion that there may be bizarre creatures inside. Just then, Morrow wakes up and manages to get out of the cabin used to protect him from the impact. On discovering that the ship has been invaded, the cyborg contacts the base to ask for reinforcements and heads for the armory. While running some tests so that the scientists can assess her capabilities, Wendy sees a news report about what is happening in the city of Prodigy and is shocked to discover that her brother's life is at risk. So she decides to go and talk to Cavalier in the hope of convincing him to send the synthetic humans to the mainland, so that they can use their powers to help people. At this point, the trillionaire sees an opportunity to test his creations and decides to send them to the scene of the accident to see how they cope in stressful situations. Immediately, Wendy rushes to talk to her team and informs them that they have been summoned to carry out a rescue mission. After preparing, the prototypes board an aircraft and are flown to the city. When they arrive in the containment room, the soldiers find countless specimens they have never seen before and begin to wonder where these monsters came from, as there is nothing like them on Earth. Still in that room, the men spot the body of a crew member and realize that he didn't perish during the crash. Instead, he was shot and perished after being shot once in the head and twice in the body. At this point, it becomes clear that the ship didn't crash on Earth by accident and, without realizing it, one of the soldiers has his body invaded by an alien worm. As they are both leaving the laboratory, Morrow appears and orders them to drop their weapons. The cyborg then escorts them back to the lab and orders them to handcuff each other. Morrow then begins an interrogation and asks for Cavalier's whereabouts, but, as expected, the guards can't tell him where the trillionaire is. Realizing that these guys can't help him, Morrow goes after the other invaders and leaves his hostages tied to the post. When they reach the cryogenic chamber, 2 other soldiers realize that there are no survivors and Joe evaluates the bodies to determine the cause of elimination. According to him, those people perished at least a week ago and their elimination has nothing to do with the accident. Worried that the creature that attacked those people is still alive inside the ship, Hermit leads his team towards the exit and doesn't even notice the presence of one of the specimens responsible for the attack in the next chamber. While reaching for the knife to free himself, Hoyt notices that there is a worm in his face and the creature crawls into his helmet. Suddenly, the monster attaches itself to the soldier's neck and starts sucking his blood until it eliminates him. As soon as the leech is full of blood, it lets go while another parasite crawls into the second officer's uniform. On her way to Prodigy City, Wendy can barely control her anxiety as she wants to get there soon to check that her brother is all right. During a brief conversation with Kirsch, the girl learns that humanity was once treated like cattle and fed to other species. However, when their brains grew up, humans learned to build tools and use them to conquer nature. Thousands of years later, the species discovered how to make a machine capable of taking them into space, and then they went from being food to becoming the most feared predator of all. The problem is that, in the animal kingdom, there will always be a bigger and stronger species capable of devouring the more vulnerable. When she hears this, Wendy understands Kirsch's objective, who is trying to make her believe that her brother will inevitably perish. But Wendy says that won't happen, because she's willing to do whatever it takes to save him. Everywhere they go, Joe and his companions see bodies scattered on the ground and none of them seem to have lost their lives in the crash. It seems that those people were eliminated because they ran out of air, which would explain their facial expressions and blue mouths. During a consultation in the medical ward, one of the crew members found a foreign body in his gastrointestinal tract, but the creature came out of the inside of the patient's body, leaving a large hole in the place. After analyzing the scene, Joe comes to the conclusion that the ship was attacked by aliens and shares his theory with Rashidi. As they are about to arrive at the crash site, Slightly notices that Wendy is apprehensive and approaches her to try to understand what is going on. When asked why she's so worried, she tells him about her brother and he promises to help her find him. Now that she has become immortal and is in perfect health, Wendy's biggest worry is losing her brother, because Joe is the only person in the world that she truly loves. In an attempt to reach the lower floors of the building to look for injured survivors, Rashidi jumps to the floor below and manages to get up without any injuries. Soon after, Siberian goes after him, but ends up falling off the platform and is about to fall off the cliff when her friend grabs her and pulls her back up. When it's Joe's turn, the young man feels goo falling on his shoulder and grabs his gun to defend himself, as he has the feeling he's being watched by someone. Seeing the monster approaching, the paramedic is terrified and risks his own life in a desperate leap that takes him 3 floors down. At this point, the creature jumps after him and Joe has to escape through a door that leads to a corridor. Luckily, he manages to get to the elevator in time, and as soon as the doors close, he uses the radio to call for reinforcements. However, no one can hear him and Joe realizes that he will have to fend for himself from now on. The day before, Joe went to Prodigy's HR department to resign, but his request was denied because he still has 7 months left on his contract. The purpose of his resignation was to go back to medical school and finish his studies, as he had made this promise to his father before he deceased. As soon as the aircraft lands in the city, Wendy and the other synthetic humans descend to begin their mission and the young woman hears a buzzing sound that no one else hears. For some reason, Wendy is the only one who can identify that sound and soon realizes that it is on a much longer wavelength than human ears are capable of detecting. In a meeting with Colonel Nag, the team discovers that the spaceship has hit a 100-story tower, which is made up of 80 floors above ground and 20 floors underground. So far, the search team has been unable to make contact with any of the soldiers who entered the building, so Wendy uses her skills to hack into the security system, going through all the cameras until she manages to locate her brother. On discovering that her brother is on the 65th floor, Wendy immediately goes after him and Kirsch orders Slightly to accompany her. Meanwhile, Kirsch leads the rest of the team and orders them to assess the damage to the building's structure before starting to rescue the survivors. Just then, in Neverland, Cavalier receives a call from Yutani and the woman asks for permission to send a team to get her ship back, since everything inside it, including the research, belongs to her company. Even with a promise to pay compensation for all the damage caused and lives lost, Cavalier refuses to allow a search team to invade his airspace. In the face of Yutani's insistence, he says that any invasion of Prodigy's territory will be considered a hostile act and will receive equivalent treatment. The truth is that Cavalier is curious to know what's inside that ship and uses a camera to follow his team's every move. When he confirms his suspicions and realizes that he is dealing with an alien threat, Kirsch decides to put Curly in charge of the operation. With the help of Nibs and Smee, the girl needs to find something that can be used to capture the monster, as Kirsch intends to take it to the island. During the search, the trio come across the two soldiers who have been handcuffed and realize that both of them have had all the blood from their bodies devoured. When she looks around, Nibs sees a kitten feeding, and the feline suddenly walks towards her. However, as it approaches her, one of the animal's eyes pops out and the youngsters discover that it was being used as a receptacle for another alien specimen. After freeing itself, the creature flies towards Nibs, intending to take possession of her body. However, thanks to her superhuman strength, she manages to get rid of the creature and Curly uses a tray to capture it. On the way up to floor 65, Wendy spots a backpack that belongs to her brother and comes to the conclusion that Joe has passed that way, so they are on the right track. At the end of the corridor, the young woman finds an elevator whose doors are marked by scratches and begins to worry, as she realizes that her brother may have been attacked. While trying to contact the base to ask for help, Joe walks through the corridors of the building and is relieved to come across Bergerfeld. At that moment, they both hear noises coming from one of the rooms and decide to knock on the door to warn the tenants about the danger of staying in that building which is about to collapse. However, instead of listening to the soldier, the man decides to close the door and go back to his private party with several other rich guys. Suddenly, when he looks back, Joe comes across the monster that chased him minutes ago and orders Bergerfeld to flee. However, upon seeing the creature for the first time, the soldier is paralyzed with fear and ends up being captured. While Bergerfeld is being eaten alive, the man who was hosting the party opens the door to check what all the noise is about and is dismayed to see the alien. Terrified, he enters the room, and after throwing the body of his victim on top of Joe, the alien goes after the rich guys, devouring them one by one. When he finally manages to get up, Joe grabs his friend's gun and goes after the alien, but all he finds are the parts of the people who were attacked. While he's distracted by the terrifying scene of the rich guy crawling across the floor without his legs, the paramedic is surprised by the alien, which leaps towards him and manages to capture him. Just as Joe is about to be devoured, the cyborg appears and shoots the monster with his stun gun. Relieved to have been saved, the young man thanks Morrow, but also ends up becoming his target. After knocking out the paramedic with one shot, Morrow immobilizes the alien in a kind of cocoon and drags him back to the ship. On the way, the cyborg is surrounded by a group of rescuers who realize that he is doing something suspicious. However, just as Morrow is about to be handcuffed, the alien manages to break free and eliminates all the soldiers. Then, instead of attacking the cyborg, the creature goes after the other humans nearby and leaves a large trail of blood wherever it goes. On being informed of the attack, Kirsch decides to hack into the system to find records of the expedition and discovers that the crew of that ship were collecting specimens in various areas of space. At that moment, Toodles is distracted by observing an alien that looks like a carnivorous plant, but is summoned to help with the investigation. Minutes after being hit by the stun gun, Joe wakes up next to countless bodies and gets up to look for a way out. At that moment, he spots a baseball that belonged to Reggie Jackson and gets emotional, as his father was a fan of the player. As soon as the TV goes off, Joe sees a woman standing behind him and can't understand why she's smiling when she sees him. As Mercy looks completely different, her brother can't recognize her and Wendy knows she can't tell him the truth. Seeing slightly with his body covered in blood, the paramedic approaches him to analyze him, but soon realizes that the young man isn't injured. Within the first few minutes of talking, Joe realizes that the two people in front of him are synthetic human beings and Wendy is tempted to tell him what they really are. However, just then the young woman receives a call from Kirsch and the man orders her and her team to run to the front of the ship, as there is a cargo there that needs to be protected. According to Kirsch, the ship is full of invasive species, and if they escape they could reproduce. So the team needs to capture them as soon as possible to prevent this from happening. After convincing her brother to accompany them, Wendy walks towards the ship, and on the way there slightly tells her that he was a child before being transferred to that body. Like Mercy, he was only 12 when he was turned into a machine, and then reveals that Wendy is Joe's sister. On hearing this, the paramedic goes into denial. having been to his sister's funeral months ago and already gone through all the grieving processes. Now that Mercy is back, Joe doesn't know how to feel about her and starts asking a lot of questions. Even before her father perished, Mercy was taken to a remote island for treatment and her father promised to keep the girl's whereabouts a secret, as this was the only condition to save his daughter's life. Still shaken by this news, Joe decides to continue walking towards the ship while trying to digest the fact that he has his sister back, only now in a new body. In an attempt to find out if Wendy is telling the truth, Joe starts asking questions that only Mercy could answer and is surprised when the girl passes the test. At that moment, the two siblings hug, and soon afterwards, they go to meet Slightly, who has just found a clutch of alien eggs. As Wendy approaches them, she hears the humming again and notices that it is even louder than last time. Suddenly, the creature appears and attacks the paramedic, knocking him off the ship. Determined to rescue her brother, Wendy orders Slightly to contact Kirsch for reinforcements and goes after Joe. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.